How many four-letter words can I use on that?
Transfers to a double. Cheddar is driving. Nothing yet. Takedown. Michael Cheddar.
Oh, Nick, I'm a top guy, so I love top wrestling.
Hale trying to stick him. He does. Maximus Hale the fall.
So I think that wrestling is the greatest sport on earth.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into On3 Wrestling. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. With me today, fellow podcaster Justin Basch of BASCHAMANIA. Been looking forward to talking to you, Justin, for quite a bit. It's always good to talk to other content creators, especially in the middle of the season. I know you're a big Bills fan. I'm not going to go on an NFL tangent with you with that, like you do with Willie, but I had to rock the Eagles sweatshirt today, so maybe we'll have to do something else if the Eagles and the Bills.
Listen, you got to be careful because everybody, you can't please everybody with the podcast. You know that, but it is funny that there's a number of people who just loathe football, and they're like, "We cannot wait for football to be over so you can really stop talking about it." And we talk about it for like 2 minutes. Like, give us these victories, like.
Oh, absolutely. You have to bask in the glow. I know. I can only imagine what a Super Bowl would do for you or Willie, considering if the Bills are hosting the Lombardi Trophy or Washington does. I mean, your podcast might go an extra like 30 minutes just to start for an intro.
You know what? And somebody was saying like, what will happen if you win? And I said, honestly, I think it's worse if I lose than it is if I win. Because if I lose, I'm on tilt. Like, anybody can win easy. I've always said about wrestlers, like, you don't really see character when people win. You see it when they lose. And it's like, it's easy to be humble in victory. It's easy to be happy when you win. But if you lose, like if we lose to the Chiefs again, that will get me. That might be a harder podcast next week if we lose than if we win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Say if, I've been an Eagle fan my whole life. They get back to the Super Bowl. I mean, I've seen a championship, so at least they would say you can.
Don't rub it in. Don't rub it in, Nick.
but same thing. If they lose to Kansas City again, I mean, I'm just like, you know what? It's about time to really pull myself back. And I work in the industry, so we just got done with college football. But college football's done, NFL's almost done. So let's talk a little bit of wrestling. Everyone knows you're mostly a big Penn State guy, so I know you had a lot of eyes on Penn State, Nebraska. Probably the duel of the weekend this past weekend. We don't have to go into the nitty-gritty of it, but it just seems like Penn State on a different level right now. Nebraska wrestled well. There's some good matches, but what were some of your instant takeaways from that match, considering, all right, people thought maybe Nebraska matches up well, and it turns out Penn State, again, the freight train was out.
Yeah, it's one of those things where one of my constant points in conversations that keeps coming up is the Penn State freshman. I mean, that's something, whether you're talking about, why are you so high on Luke Lillidahl? Why this? Why that? Historically, over the past decade, from Mark Hall to Chenzo to all these guys, like the freshmen have done so good. And we're seeing that again this year. We're seeing, I'm sure you've seen the banter with me and Willie going back and forth, giving him a hard time about Josh Barr and not knowing kind of where he would be. And it's like, sure, I have a bias. I love those guys. But it's like to watch these Penn State freshmen year after year continue to have early success. And, I've had so many guys in the podcast over the years that talk about that transition from high school to college. And when you talk about guys, even Josh Barr, when Josh was just on the podcast, he was saying how he went from this incredible high school wrestler to walking into the Penn State room and just getting crushed. He couldn't get a takedown. He couldn't beat anybody. And that Penn State magic to take wrestlers from really good high school wrestlers to good college wrestlers is something that obviously not everybody can figure out. And Penn State continues to have the success. And I think whether it's, Tyler Kasich beating Antrell Taylor, Luke Lillidahl getting his first top 10 win, Josh Barr teching Camden McDaniel. I mean, just the level of success specifically with the freshmen, I think has been incredible this year.
Who do you think is more impressive right now? I know Kasich got into the lineup last year and made his run in NCAAs, but Lillidahl and Barr seemingly just have burst onto the scene. I think maybe in particular Barr because he hasn't lost yet. I mean, obviously Lillidahl hasn't lost yet either, but Barr doing it at 197, following up a guy like Carter Starachi within that lineup. Who's been more impressive in your eyes as a freshman?
I think Josh Barr. I think Josh Barr by a mile. Luke Lillidahl, even when Willie was doing his crystal ball, he came out and put Lillidahl like first or second, because, and we talked about this on our show yesterday, where it's like Luke Lillidahl to me is in that category of these younger guys who don't just have a one-off year of success internationally. They have consistent. Lillidahl made like 4 straight world championship finals from cadets and juniors. And it's like when you have that consistent level of success internationally, forget everything he's done in high school, multiple Super 32 champ, multiple Ironman champ, I think, like just incredible high school career. But what he's done internationally, you put him in the upper echelon with Spencer Lee, Gable, Yanni. So Lillidahl has super high expectations. Barr, while a very good high school wrestler, did not have nearly the same accolades as Lillidahl. And 97 also, 125 is, and Willie and I argued about this for 20 minutes yesterday, 125 is like wide open. He said 125 pounds is like 33 Will Luans. And I laughed at him, and I'm like, there's such good talent, but, his point is it's so wide open, and I understand that. So it's like for what Lillidahl's doing in 125, it's almost like that's the expectation he should be, especially in that current field. Where if you look at Josh Barr and even the matches he has already won, he majored Michael Beard. He beat Stephen Little in a tough overtime match. He teched Cam McDaniel. He's got 90% bonus on the year. He continues to have these tests and just dominates, even beating multiple Penn State guys, majoring Cochran and then majoring Connor Mirasola at the Black Knight invite. Like Josh Barr has continued to just, you want to talk about a guy who that was, you could argue, I mean, that might have been the weakest weight on paper for Penn State to AA this year. And I think it might be the only weight Willie didn't have a guy in the All-American. And part of that was not knowing who was going to go for Penn State. But Josh Barr has just continued to impress me because, he's one of the things that stinks about Lillidahl is he's only going to have Caleb Smith is the only top 10 guy he's going to see all regular season. He might Dean Peterson might fall out of the top 10 now with his loss last week, but those are the only 2 matches. Whereas now Josh Barr, he's not only had Little, he's not only had Beard, he's got John Paz this weekend, and then he's got Stephen Buchanan and Jacob Cardenas, who I would say is the 1 and the 2. I know we got AJ Ferrari in there, but I think with what Buchanan and Cardenas are doing. So Barr not only is continuing to impress, I mean, he's going through the gauntlet, and I think it's for the better. I think iron sharpens iron. So, yeah, he continues to just impress me.
Yeah, with the way they've both been wrestling, I mean, again, it probably would not surprise me if they're both, even before NCAA, staying at the top of the podium at Big Tens. And Lillidahl, you just mentioned with 125, how crazy that weight class has been. Of course, Barr, I mean, it just seems like every year Penn State's guys, they have that March magic. They turn up the juice a little bit, win a match maybe they weren't anticipated to win a few months earlier, and then they carry that over through the Big Ten tournament, through the NCAA tournament. So I'm glad you said Josh Barr because going back to the beginning of the year, I had no idea he was going to start. I got to imagine Cochran was maybe the favorite. If you go back to the preseason, maybe Mirasola, one of the Mirasola brothers, but it seemed like Barr was maybe the 3rd man in that. If you want to put it on a depth chart, it seemed like Barr wasn't even going to be that guy, not even close to this year.
Well, especially with his weight, he was going up, and that was part of the question too. Is he seems light. And 97, you look at whether it's Ferrari, whether you look at Buchanan, Cardenas, like these are true 97-pounders. And, it's going to be fun because we're going to have Buchanan, Cardenas, Barr, the current 2, 3, 4. They're all going to wrestle in the regular season. They're all going to likely hit at Big Tens. We'll probably see them again in NCAAs, because, I mean, the rest of the top 8, you have Ferrari in the Pac-12 and Stephen Little in the Pac-12. You got Michael Beard in EIWAs and Luke Serber in the Big 12s, Andy Smith ACC, and then even after that, it's Trey Munoz Pac-12 Max Stout ACC. So those are the 3 guys in the Big Ten, and they're arguably the best in the country. So it is, a true testament to how good he's doing, and to have this performance and be right in the mix with these guys. Like people, even when people were saying about Nebraska and Penn State and how well they matched up. And I started talking about, I think Iowa might match up better if you look at the numbers, and not everything is numbers, but considering them, that matters. And it's like, man, the fact that people aren't saying Buchanan, next topic, over Barr, when Buchanan has had the level of success that he's had. If you were to say in the beginning of the year, Stephen Buchanan would be 12-0 right now, 83% bonus, and people wouldn't really be saying he's that big of a favorite over Barr, it is kind of a testament to what kind of season Barr has had so far.
Without a doubt, Penn State and Iowa wrestle on the 31st. So we'll find out in about 10 days whether, how well they match up. But I think Penn State's on a different level. We'll circle back to them in a second, but I wanted to switch to a former Nittany Lion who's having a great impact, David Taylor on Oklahoma State. I know that there are arguments out there that Oklahoma State might actually be the number 2 team behind Penn State rather than Iowa. Again, we don't see him wrestle this year, so I believe off the top of my head. So unless we, get into a different discussion there. But Oklahoma State has had a tremendous year, and it seems like the turnaround happened instantaneously. Now, I don't know if it was just because it's that first-year adrenaline, essentially, from David Taylor and a new staff and a new regime, or this seems like it's going to be sustainable for the long term. I'm leaning towards the latter because I think everybody knows how good Taylor was as a wrestler, how he is as a club coach, and it seems to have carried over so far to a program that's going to give him a lot of resources moving forward. What have been your main takeaways from Oklahoma State and David Taylor this year? I know they had a bit of a grind against West Virginia the other night, but other than that, they've pretty much mopped the floor with everybody this year.
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. I think the wrestling world was foaming at the mouth for some parity in the sport. Everybody except Penn State fans are sick of Penn State's dominance. When you have a headline that is, instead of like, can Iowa catch Penn State? Can, this school break the top 3? The headlines are, can Penn State win by 100? Can Penn State set the scoring record? And you have a lot of people who want that aspect of the sport to be more exciting. And I think David Taylor's hire came at the time when everybody was rooting for Penn State to, I don't know if they're rooting for Penn State to fail as much as they are just they want somebody to dethrone them. And I think that's natural in sports fandom. And I think with the timing of John Smith retiring and everybody kind of wanting to have more competition, the David Taylor hire was the absolute right guy, right time, right place. And, between David Taylor's wrestling IQ, he's proven that he's absolutely one of the best in the world, one of the best to ever do it. He's an Olympic champ. He's a world champ. He's absolutely owned Yazdani, who's one of the best ever. David Taylor has proven that he has a wrestling IQ that is in the top 0.001% in the world to me. And so I think when you take that alone and give him a program with resources like Oklahoma State is offering, I think that spells success. I also think you have the advantage of David Taylor has been in that Penn State room for the last 12, 13 years. I mean, he's been there basically since Cal got there. So if you see what Cal has done and you've lived it, I mean, you're in a pretty good position from my point of view to really capitalize on having some team success. So I think David's doing awesome. And I also think, to the point of the success they're having, I think it's a couple of things. Number one, half of that lineup is transfers. Mm-hmm. So even if John Smith was still the coach, I think you'd see guys like Dean Hamidi, Wyatt Hendrickson. I think you'd see these guys having success. Now, I absolutely think some of these guys there's not only momentum, it's like Oklahoma State is kind of like the it factor right now. Mm-hmm. There's something exciting. There's what's going to happen. So, I think when you have a coaching staff like David's put together, there's excitement. And I think guys, you're seeing them wrestle better. And listen, part of it's coaching. Thomas Gilman is a very good lightweight coach. David Taylor knows wrestling. Jimmy Kennedy, like if you talk to the Penn State lightweights and middleweights, they'll tell you that. I mean, even going back to Jimmy Kennedy at Northwestern when he helped coach Sebastian Rivera to beat Spencer Lee. Like these guys are very good coaches. So I'm not at all surprised to see guys performing as good as they have so far this year.
does something like this, I mean, I know the year isn't over yet, and you still have to see how they perform at the Big 12 tournament at NCAAs, where they finish in that team race. And I'm not calling for anybody to dethrone Penn State this year. If that happens this year, like last year, it would have been probably the greatest, maybe the greatest upset in college wrestling history.
Yeah,
in
it
terms
would
of a
be.
team race. Right. So when you look at Oklahoma State, how do you project this out? Do you think this is now going to be the Penn State-Oklahoma State show moving forward? Do the Cowboys need another year or two to develop their own guys, maybe grab a few transfers that are going to be there for more than just 1 year for a stopgap year? I know Iowa would certainly be in the mix based on their resources and their history, but it seems like now it's Penn State, Oklahoma State rather than Penn State, maybe Iowa, and a few others that are going to challenge from the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think Iowa's kind of in their own little world. Iowa, they have one of the most historied programs of all time. And I think Iowa has their own problems to get together. I think they need to sort through some stuff to get back to where they once were. Oklahoma State, I think, is going to I think you're going to see a couple years of these transfers. I mean, a lot of it comes down to, like you said, how do they finish this year? If, for example, let's just say Wyatt Hendrickson or Dean Hamidi, these guys who are very good, but getting through, Wyatt Hendrickson would have to dethrone Gable Steveson, Kirk Fleet, NCAA champs. Hamidi would have to take out O'Toole, Levi Haynes. So if David can get one of those guys to that next level, or if Troy Spratley can win a national championship, I think in the short term, you're going to see guys go, yeah, David Taylor's the guy. Let me go try to transfer there. At the same time, I don't think Oklahoma State wants to win, and they want to win now. They've proven that with the resources they've given David. And so I think there's that let's win now mentality. I also think you kind of have to give David a whole recruiting class. You kind of have to give him that time to recruit kids and develop them and see. And I think that's why, I think he got like a 5 or 6 year contract, something like that. So, it makes sense. If you're David, obviously recruiting is going to be a huge part of the success you have or don't have. So I think, once he can start recruiting and getting those kids in there, and obviously you've got, maybe it's just because we're paying attention to it more now, but, the recruiting class that's out there, you talk about the Bishop McCourt kids and all these superstars, there's a lot of opportunity for him to win some big talent over to Oklahoma State, which I think would do a lot for the program.
Yeah, especially, the Bo Bassett's of the world, his teammates over at Bishop McCourt, the ones that have not committed yet, whether it's they're part of next year's class or even the 27 class, that teams like that in high school, probably ripe for the taking. It would be naturally assumed to say it's going to be Penn State, it's going to be Iowa. Maybe it's just Penn State, because obviously we know how Cale's able to collect this abundance of talent, and then these guys buy into the program, and they really don't transfer anywhere. They sit and bide their time, they train, and they work into the lineup eventually. So maybe something like that does change things with Oklahoma State against Penn State, some other schools as well. We talked about Penn State's dominance. Just looking ahead a little bit to Friday. Not much to say in terms of the team score for Penn State and Rutgers. They go to Piscataway. That's Penn State's lone dual meet this week. Rutgers has Illinois, a top 10 opponent, on Sunday. So they have basically the gauntlet. This is their Big Ten gauntlet this weekend, and they'll have Minnesota in a couple of weeks as well. But for this Penn State-Rutgers duel, we already alluded to a couple interesting matchups on paper right now. We mentioned Luke Littledoll against Dean Peterson, John Poznanski against Josh Barr. We'll see how it goes. Generally, in these duels, Penn State either throws out the full lineup, or I think it was last year where a couple guys sat out. It was a little bit closer to Big Tens. I'm not going to ask you for a prediction on this duel, because I think Penn State can pretty much win 9 or 8, or 8 to 9 bouts at minimum against anybody in the country. But what are you looking most forward to for this duel on Friday night as they go to New Jersey? I think it has to be Peterson against Littledoll and Barr against Poznanski. Those are probably the two highlight ones of the duel on Friday.
Yeah. Willie and I have been tracking wrestling lines throughout the year, and I'm very curious at what this line looks like, because on paper, Rutgers has some good talent, but similar to the Nebraska duel, it's just crazy how people line up with Penn State. You've got half the Rutgers guys that they've already seen some of the Penn State guys. Like Bartlett's already majored Joey Oliveri. Van Ness has teched Clark. Messenbrink's teched White a couple times. Kirk has majored Slavakuski. Like some of these matchups we've already seen, and it's swayed heavy in Penn State's favor. It will be interesting to see if Penn State, like you said, does wrestle all 10 guys. So far this year, they've wrestled everybody at every duel. I don't think they've sat anybody. And listen, part of that is definitely health. You know, I think sometimes if we don't see 2 or 3 guys, we just allude to the fact that they're sitting. It's also winter. The flu can go through a program. Sickness can go through a program. Guys get banged up. I mean, you're talking now, we've had a full month of competition in November, a full month of competition in December, and now we're 3/4 of the way through a full month of competition in January. Guys start getting banged up this time of year. We just saw the Campbell heavyweight last night. The coach said he's out for the season now. You know, we're plagued with this. We're plagued right now with so many season-ending injuries. And I think that more than ever, I think people should respect if somebody sits for the sake of like, listen, if somebody's banged up a little bit, let them sit. Now, I do think coaches should be transparent in communicating that to manage expectations. You know, for example, if Penn State fans are traveling to Jersey for the Rutgers duel, like, let's both sides say who's competing. But on paper, I mean, I would say that Lilladal Peterson should be one of the matches of the night. I also think Davis and Shawver.
Yep.
You know, that's a match that for me I'm paying close attention to, because so Braden Davis last year goes out and, you know, won Big Tens, looked awesome. I don't think anybody really expected that. And then this year, you know, he lost to Crookham and he just lost to Van D. Apart from that, he's looked good, but it's like people are waiting for Braden Davis to take that next step. Can he make that jump at 33? On the same side, at the same weight, you got Shawver, who's last year's Big Ten champ at 133. So I'm putting that graphic out actually this morning, where it's this weekend we could get Big Ten champ versus Big Ten champ, which is pretty cool. Now, Shawver, again, extremely talented because he's a Big Ten champ. At the same time, this year, he's had, you know, a couple losses, but it's like, can he get to that next level? Can he get back on the All-American podium this year? And where can he fall into, you know, how high can he climb that podium? Because 33, you got Crookham out now for the year likely. So with Crookham out, I think, did my computer just freeze?
It might be.
Okay.
I mean, Lucas Bird I believe he just lost to Buzakis, who Shawver's beaten. So 33, I'm looking at the top. This is from last week's rankings anyway. But it just seems like the top 10 are very similar to 125, where all these guys are kind of beating each other. So this weight might be a little bit random, like 25. If Crookham's out for the year, that knocks off the number 1 guy. Bird just lost to Buzakis. Shawver beat him. Drake Ayala's in the mix. Can't forget about the way Zeth Romney's wrestled this year for Cal Poly. We already mentioned Davis. And then guys like Evan Frost and Nasir Bailey, you know, they're not, you know, they have their blemishes on the record this year. Then Tyler Knox as well of Stanford, who, again, from the Rutgers perspective, Shawver has seen before over at Midlands. That was the Midlands final. So it seems like all these guys are seemingly in the mix, and it does have that randomness to it, just like 125.
Yeah, I think my computer froze because I was saying the same thing, where it's like with Crookham out for the year now, like this weight is kind of wide open. And if that coaching staff can get Shawver to that next level, number one, right now Shawver's ranking sits at 9. So he's right on that bubble of being All-American status. A win over Braden Davis would be huge for him. So I think that for me is probably one of the matches of the night. The rest of them, you know, it's like Barr and Paz, like Poznanski's been all over the place. You know, this would be a good opportunity for him. At the same time, you're running into a buzzsaw with Josh Barr.
Barr's wrestling, yeah.
You know, so it's like you can't really fault Paz if he loses to Barr, but it's a huge opportunity for you to knock off one of the hottest wrestlers in the NCAA right now.
Without a doubt. And then you mentioned the lightweights and then that matchup. Other than that, we've seen these matchups before, so I think it might just be a measuring stick type of thing for Rutgers, whether they, you know, if it's all 10 versus all 10, We'll see how they match up. But again, Penn State, I mean, they're a bad matchup, let's be honest, for pretty much everybody in the country. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, the Big Ten champ versus Big Ten champ at 133, pretty good, pretty awesome. And obviously with that match being on Big Ten Network, the entire country will be able to see that one. I wanted to go back to the preseason a little bit with you.
Yeah.
It's about your national champion predictions at each weight. I had mine. I went back and actually looked at it, and I found it quite interesting what I said back in November. I wanted to judge your confidence meter from every pick that you made. If you can remember off the top of your head, or if you have your list in front of you, I'm looking at what I picked, and I know I have to change one at heavyweight, but this is before a certain someone came back. So I wanted to look at your confidence meter based on who you picked in the preseason, and then you would change that now. So 125, I had Richie Figs winning his second straight title. I don't think I'm going to change that, only because, as you alluded to, and I watched that entire argument with you and Willie. 20 minutes. I don't think we can get anything done with 125. So I'm going to stick to it, although I have to acknowledge how good Matt Ramos has been this year. He's, I think, taken his wrestling to a new level here in 24-25.
Yeah, I think I don't remember who I picked at 25 initially, but I think I predicted a Ramos Lillidahl final, which I stand by that. I think with Lillidahl's success, I think, he could very likely be in that. And Matt Ramos, it's tough this year to have confidence, and kind of as the weights go on, it gets increasingly more where the question comes up of what's their health. Is Richie Figs fully back? He's wrestled like 4 matches all year. Is he fully healthy right now? Because a fully healthy Rich Figs who won last year, forget the uncertainty at 125. It's also about their health. And is Richie Figs 100%, or is he just excited to get back out? That's like a huge question mark. So, I think those top 4 guys that I laid out, Ramos, Figs, Robinson, and Lillidahl, are kind of the 4 that I have out in front. But I think it's a Ramos Lillidahl final. I think you have to go Ramos at this point. I think he's now like 20-0 without giving up a single takedown. I mean, at any weight, if somebody is not giving up a single takedown, they're pretty hard to pick against.
Yeah, he's probably number 1 at this point. And then the same thing goes with 133. I actually picked Nasir Bailey to win this in the preseason, and that was nothing against Crookham, and I'm not going to say, I got it right, because now he might be potentially hurt, of course, but it seems like Bailey, to me, was going to be the hottest guy this year. He'll carry over that great run last season, and then I guess Little Rock taking that next step. But again, 133, like 125, like we just mentioned, it's so random. I don't know where to go with this, and it could be anybody between Braden Davis, Drake Ayala, Lucas Bird, Dylan Shawver, Nick Buzaga, any of these guys. So, again, I'm sticking with Bailey at this point, but this one, I have, like 25, I think I have little to no confidence of getting this one right at this point.
Yeah, this is a 0 confidence pick for me, because on one hand, Seth Romney's looking incredible, but can he carry that into the postseason? And, one of my points that I don't think I finished on yesterday's show was that to some of these weights, yes, I understand anything can happen. You also likely have to beat 2 or 3 of these top guys in the semis and the finals to win. And it's like, so for me, when I'm picking, it's kind of like, which guy can I see knocking off multiple guys to get there? And with Crookham out, who I think is a clear favorite. Now, there is discrepancy in whether or not Crookham will be back.
Right.
He's got an elbow injury. There's hope he'll be back for the postseason. There's uncertainty. There's don't risk it, medical redshirt it. So we don't know if he's back. And again, is he going to rush back? What's the status? What's the severity of the elbow injury? There's very little transparency in college wrestling, so we don't know. So without knowing if Crookham will be back and what his status is, I think Drake Ayala, returning national finalist, has got to be a front runner to win it. He's proven he was Iowa's savior last year in the fact of their streak of having a finalist for however many years, 30, 40 years of having a finalist, and he saved the day. So I think that Ayala can be right in the finals again. I think he can win it. Braden Davis, we'll see how he does these next couple of weeks. But, man, Penn State coaches have proven that when it comes time to March, they have these kids ready. So I think, call it a bias or just call it for, what it is. Penn State coaches are very good. And listen, Braden Davis, he's going to have a gauntlet because he's got this next month. He sees Shaver, who's a returning All-American this weekend. Drake Ayala, who's a returning national finalist next weekend. Fast forward to the middle of February, and in the same weekend, he faces 2 top 10 guys in Nick Kosko from Ohio State and Lucas Bird from Illinois. So Davis is going to have his opportunity with 4 of the top 10 guys in the country over the next month. So I think my confidence will change maybe depending on what happens over the next month. And even too with Drake Ayala, he's got his schedule's tough too. He's got Jacob Van D, who just knocked off Braden Davis. He's got Nick Kouzakis this weekend. So some of these guys, man, it's especially in the Big Ten where I figure you do hit so many of the good guys. Like Seth Romney, he looks great. He's only got 1 loss. I think he lost to Tyler Knox. But he wrestles guys. If you look at his next 5 matches and just go by their wrestle stat ranking, it's 102 Lopez, 112 Damian Elliott, Nasir Bailey 8, Baker 74, Sanchez 103. So you got 3 guys that aren't even in the top 100. Yeah. You got 1 guy who's 74th, and then you do got a good match with Nasir Bailey. But man, picking confidence based on that, so it's so tough, man. It is. I
mean, you're right, and then the fact that you mentioned the strength of schedule, which is huge for guys that are in the Big Ten. You mentioned Romney, who is not going to have that quote unquote strength of schedule leading into the conference tournaments and NCAAs, maybe aside from wrestling, a guy like Nasir Bailey. But yeah, like 125, I honestly probably have no idea at this point until we actually get brackets, and even then, it's going to be unpredictable. 41 and 49, I want to kind of loop together because I'm personally not going to change. I had Alirez in the preseason and Caleb Henson both getting their second titles. I'm more confident in Henson because of the way he's wrestled this year. I know Shane Van Ness is really good, but he just lost to Ridge Lovett. Lovett also has a loss on the year. Parko's been really good for Iowa. That top 4 to me is probably the guys that are going to win the title, one of those 4. I don't want to make it, 1 of 4 guys. But so I would lean towards Henson at 49, but 41, maybe a little bit less confident because the way Jesse Mendez has been just obliterating guys this year. Now, again, maybe an impending matchup in the Big Ten Finals with Bo Bartlett again. That'd be something great to see. Maybe that's your national final again. Bartlett, to me, he's not going to be as explosive scoring like the other 2, but he just keeps winning, and it's hard to say no to him at this point. He just keeps winning, so I'm a little less confident in that. I will stick with Alirez. I'm sticking with Henson at 49, but it seems like 41, it could be one of those 3 guys now at this point.
Yeah, those 3 at 41 have really put themselves out in front. They're like, I don't know, 32, 33, 34-0 on the year, I think. Mm-hmm. They're incredible. But for me, it's Jesse Mendez kind of. Obviously, Alirez can win. Obviously, Bartlett can win. But for me, Mendez is out in front by himself. Yeah. Number 1, he did beat Alirez in the All-Star Classic, I think?
Yeah, beat the streets right back in the summer.
Beat the streets, yep. Yeah. So it's like, I think Mendez, for me, first of all, is the true returning champ. Yep. Alirez was off a year. I'll always go, who's the current returning champ over a returning champ off Olympic redshirt year? Mm-hmm. I think Mendez has proven that he just wants it. I mean, he's won more matches than anybody at that weight this year. Alirez wrestled like 6 matches all year. So he missed from like middle of November to early January. Why? Again, we don't really know. So, I'm pretty confident in a Mendez pick right now. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Alirez can win. Obviously, Bo Bartlett. I mean, Bartlett and Mendez last year in the NCAA finals was electric, and it proved that it could have went either way. So I think Mendez is still my pick, but I think Alirez and Bartlett are right there. 49, man, If you would have asked me before Friday night, I would have said Shane Van Ness with the utmost confidence because he's just scoring points. He's dominating in 5 straight pins. And then Lovett, man, he kind of exposed a little weakness in Shane's game, which I think is good. I think these guys would rather have that now, and Shane Van Ness can say, what just happened with Ridge Lovett, and let me get there. You know, we're going to see where Shane is against Parco next weekend. You know, we're going to see number 2 versus number 3. So, or that's the current rankings.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's tough, man, because it's like, I don't know, maybe it's a bias, but I always kind of favor Big Ten guys because I think I believe iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
And the schedule these guys wrestle all year, it's a gauntlet. But at the same time, how do you pick against Caleb Henson? He's undefeated. He's the returning national champ. It's like, it's definitely, I don't want to call it the easy pick, but I mean, he's 12-0 with 83% bonus on the year. So I don't know, man. It's tough. I'd still maybe show some Penn State homerism here. I think Van Ness will get it done. It's hard to. I understand his loss to Lovett this weekend, but man, it's hard to dismiss everything else he's done this season and say, he's no longer a title contender because he lost a close match. Well, not really close, like 10-2, but
yeah. But a previous NCAA finalist, like, I mean, it's not like he got stunned by somebody who's coming off a red shirt or something along those lines. So I hear you. Van Ness to me is, especially after his run the other year to 3rd place, you're like, okay, yeah, that kid's probably a future national champion in that Penn State room. So I could see it, and I'm fine with you saying easy pick. I will stick with Henson because I didn't anticipate him winning last year in Kansas City, and then all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, this kid is just absolutely just mauling everybody. And then you know, I will stick with him right now. I would say I'm probably a little bit more confident in that than I would be at 41. 57 and 65, lumping them together, because 65 to me is almost the next topic, because I think it's Mitchell Messenbrink and then the field. I love Mikey Caliendo. I love Peyton Hall, guys like that. Barraclaw has been awesome since going to Utah Valley. And I've talked to Adam Hall before. I'm like, yeah, he's like, that's your instant impact guy to get that program rolling. But to me, it's Messenbrink and then everybody else at 65. 57's where I'm kind of flipping multiple coins, because I could have said Teamer I said Meyer Shapiro in the preseason, but we've seen him and Teamer get banged up, not really wrestle much. I think less than 10 matches combined to this point of the season. K-Sacks look really good for Penn State. Ryder Downey's look really good for Northern Iowa. We obviously Antrell Taylor's been really good. It seems like after Teamer and Shapiro, and then I guess K-Sack, you get a lump of guys where it's like anybody can beat anybody at that point. But if one of the top 2, Teamer and Shapiro, are fully healthy, they are, to me, the favorite. But I'm not really sure where to go with 57 at this point, other than if Shapiro's healthy, I'll pick him. But other than that, I'm kind of like, all right, let me just watch the chaos.
This weight might be one of those sit back and watch. You know, this is the Joker meme where he just lights the grenade and walks away from the hospitals and explodes, because, you know, there's so many different arguments you can make at this weight. Ryder Downey has more wins than anybody in this weight. He's looked awesome this year. Tyler Kasich, he's looked great. He's undefeated. Just had a win over Antrell Taylor, and you know, Teamer lost 5-0 to a Penn State guy last year in the finals. Could I see Kasich beating him? Sure. Could I see Teamer winning and getting over that hump? Absolutely. My biggest thing in Meyer is incredible. The thing with Meyer and Chikori, like you said, they've wrestled less than 10 matches together. How do you confidently pick someone who you don't know where they're at? And the other thing, too, is that, like, there's pros and cons to wrestling through the whole season. I think when you get momentum and you're getting better, you know, that helps. At the same time, you're getting banged up a little bit.
Yep.
Chikori and Meyer, they've had a lot of time off the mat. Will that help them or will that hurt them in the postseason? On one side, they might not be getting banged up as much. On the other, they're not really developing and they're not really getting better. Where's their conditioning level at? If you're off the mat, you know, we don't know what Teamer's injury was, but it looked like a hamstring. you can't really do cardio as you nurse a hamstring injury.
Not really.
So where's Teamer's conditioning going to be? Where's Meyer's conditioning going to be? Because guys like Kasich and Downey, and even guys like Cody Chittum and Joey Blaze, you see these guys, and while I might not pick Joey Blaze to win it, you're telling me Joey Blaze can't knock off one of these guys, in the quarters, in the round of 16? Like, this weight for me is just a giant question mark, where I think those current top 4 guys, if you're telling me Teamer won, yep. Shapiro won, yep. Kasich won, yep. Downey won, yep. Like, it's just one of those weights where it's such a question mark because there is so much unknown that it's just it's a giant question mark. I don't even remember who I picked at this weight. I think I likely went Teamer.
Yeah.
But with his injury, I mean, what a question mark.
Yeah, it really is. And I think, as we just repeatedly mentioned, let's just watch this one. Once we get to Philadelphia, it's like, okay, I'm get my popcorn ready. Let's watch 57 unfold here. I got to imagine Mess and Brink, next topic for you at 165 right now.
Yeah, I mean, Caliendo, we just talked about on the show yesterday. He's got to be one of Izzy's biggest success stories. And to clarify, because we had said that yesterday, and I am just strictly talking collegiately within men, because Kennedy Blades is far and away Izzy's biggest success story.
Absolutely.
I think what Kennedy has done has been incredible, and she's still so young. So yesterday's context about Caliendo was strictly men college. But I just think if you're Mess and Brink, and to be honest, as great as Caliendo has looked, I think Peyton Hall and Bearclaw are right there with him. I think it's Mess and Brink, and then I think you have these 3 absolute beasts in Caliendo, Hall, and Bearclaw, where I said it, I forgot what the number was. I looked it up. It's like 55-1, something like that. Those top 4 guys at 65, which is crazy.
That's insane. Especially
like almost end of January. But I think Caliendo and Hall and Bearclaw are all right there. It's just when you have a guy like Mess and Brink, who, I mean, at this point, I think, I know it's a little early for it, but if you start talking Hodge watch, and, the Hodge is going to be interesting this year. I haven't heard nothing about it, and I think part of that is...
at this point, no. I can't tell. I can't necessarily tell who's been dominant. I mean, unless you throw a certain heavyweight's name out there. But, I mean,
that's going to be the big question mark.
Yeah.
Is, number one, would they give it to Gable again? Number 2, he's only got 5 or 6 matches all year this year.
Right.
He's wrestled in like 5 duels, I think. So I don't know if he's going to get it. Obviously, if he wins out, Texas way out, it's going to be interesting. But you talk about a guy like Messenbrink, and he's 12-0 on the year with 100% bonus. He looked incredible last weekend, teching Bubba Wilson. I don't know that there's another guy as much as Messenbrink where I don't want to say you're not looking forward to his matches because he's always fun, but is there a single match this year that you're not expecting a tech? I mean, he's teched every match this year.
Yeah, he's beat everybody down. And I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but it seems like, if you remember, I believe it was Zane's final season where he might have teched or pinned his way through the entire NCAA bracket at 49 that year. This, to me, it seems like it's going a ways of that path. Like, I could see Messenbrink just bonusing his way. Maybe not I think he's bound to have one close match or 2 close matches at some point this year. But when he turns it on for March and we see him in Philadelphia, I could easily see a situation where he wins 5 in a row by tech, pin, major, and we're talking about him winning, 12-1 in the finals at 165.
He's gonna have Caliendo next weekend, so both those guys wrestle. That's gonna be one of the matches of the night, I think. A couple of them. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it right now. It's literally every single 21-4, 17-2, 19-4, 18-3, 18-1, 18-1, 15-0, 17-1, 20-5, 20-3, and then he took 2 forfeit wins. That's just insane. I mean, so it's like yes, Caliendo is very good. Yes, Peyton Hall, Bearclaw, very good. Yes, even sprinkling guys like Julian Ramirez, but when you have a guy that dominant, that's maybe the most confident pick out of any weight. Maybe.
Yeah, I would say so too. 74 is weird because we know Keegan O'Toole's out to at least February. And again, going back to your injury transparency conversation, I love that Brian Smith's been very transparent this year, among others. I believe Kevin Dresser's been doing the same thing for Iowa State.
He's been awesome.
Yeah, I had Keegan O'Toole in the preseason moving up a weight, and that was nothing against Levi Haynes, who I think is excellent and could easily win this weight. I think it was my simple rationale was Keegan's moving up 1 weight, Levi's moving up 2 weights, and that was pretty much it. But he's banged up, so I'm a little less confident now. I would lean towards Levi at this point. I can't continue the conversation without Dean Hamidi because he's been on a different level this year since going from Wisconsin to Oklahoma State this year. But I think it's one of those 3 guys. Ultimately, we're probably going to get a Keegan-Levi final. But I could see Dean Hamidi sneaking in there. But I think if you're going to favor somebody now, I'd be more confident in saying Levi's probably your pick right now.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if O'Toole will be back in time for the Oklahoma State duel.
Mm-hmm.
So if he's back for the postseason, we're going to have a likely O'Toole, Hamidi, Big 12 final. Either way, they're the 1 and the 2 in the weight.
Mm-hmm.
So because Penn State and Oklahoma State don't duel, we're not going to see Haynes and Hamidi. So I think those are the 3 guys that are clearly out in front. And like you said, with the injury in O'Toole, and again, I cannot stress it that the Penn State coaches have those guys ready in March. So if you're telling me that you're picking O'Toole, 100% understand it. He just beat Levi, and he can do it again. At the same time, if you told me that a wrestler lost in a duel in January or December and then won the rematch in March, I can see that happening too. And with not knowing where Keegan is, I'm going to go Levi. I think it's one of those things where I think Levi will learn from the loss. I think the fact that it was December 22nd when they wrestled, and Levi has 3 months. They peak really well for March.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm confident. I think it is a coin toss. I think maybe bias pushes to one way or another. Not really knowing where O'Toole is. And listen, I know sometimes when I don't know that I agree with the take, but when I sometimes talk about these 5th-year guys, 6th-year guys getting injuries, there's a lot of comments that are like, well, no crap, they're injured. It's very taxing on your body to do this for 5 or 6 years. That's why historically you do it for 4.
Yeah.
Not by choice, but Levi is in his 5th year. He never took a redshirt year, so he does have that where this is his true 5th year. But, yeah, I mean, Levi's incredible. I think he's a shoo-in for his 5th top 3rd finish, which is just crazy. He was 3rd, first, 3rd. And now, no matter what argument you make about this weight come March, I don't think anybody's going to not put O'Toole in that top 3. If he, I think the way I think it's going to shape up is O'Toole up top and Haynes Hamidi in the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like O'Toole's going to have somebody like Patrick Kennedy or Lorenzo Norman if ranks kind of held out. So I think that's a, pretty shoo-in for O'Toole to make the finals. So even assume by that logic, he's very likely a 3rd-time finalist and now a 1st or 2nd place finish. So he's had an incredible career, man. I could see either of those top 2 guys, O'Toole,
Mm-hmm.
Haynes, winning. And Hamidi, it's like, man, as good as he is this year, can he knock off an NCAA champion now? It's going to be tough. He's incredible,
yeah.
But yeah, those aren't there. There's a big gap between these guys in what they've previously done. So it's going to be hard because O'Toole and Levi have both proven that when it comes to March. I just said Levi went 3rd, first, 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're talking guys who've had that success, and Levi Haynes is 2 for 2 with making the NCAA finals.
Yeah,
he was a runner-up and then a champion. So
I would say 3 for 3 at this point, at least making the finals when it comes to 174. And then it'll be interesting. And if Hamidi shocks everybody and knocks off O'Toole in the Big 12 finals, then we're talking about the seedings getting a little weird. Maybe Hamidi's number 1, then you have Haynes and Haynes and O'Toole, as the 2-3. at NCAAs, and that's your semifinal, then it gets a little bit wacky right there. So this weight could be very interesting at the top when we get to Philly. 84, I don't want to say next topic because I don't want to give any disrespect to Parker Keckeisen, who is a national champ in his own right, but I had Carter Sirachi in the I had Carter Sirachi in the preseason. It's hard not to pick him and go for his 5th title. But I mean, if you did not pick Sirachi in the preseason, I could understand as long as you're picking Parker Keckeisen. I think it's the only guy who could actually beat him. Everybody else, and I threw out a tweet, I think it was a week or two ago. I mentioned how a guy like Max McAnally, I would not be shocked if he made the final, but I think he would have to beat a guy like Keckeisen. I don't think Sirachi's going to lose to anybody. McAnally, to me, is a guy who's a future national champion for Minnesota, and obviously Dustin Plott's still in the mix right there to make some noise, but to me, it's Sirachi and Keckeisen. Sirachi's the guy, 5th national title. He'll make history. It's hard to go on a long discussion here and say and make the argument for the other guy. Keckeisen, to me, is the only guy who can beat him, but I think Sirachi's already proven that you're not beating him.
Yeah. I mean, you got to kind of go by the chain of command here. Parker has beaten Plott 4 times in a row.
Yep.
He beat him last year in the duel. He majored him last year at Big 12s, and he majored him last year at NCAAs. He then beat him this year at Cliff Keen. So there's a clear gap between Parker and Dustin. And even Max and Gabe Arnold and these guys are good, but there's a clear barrier between Dustin Plott and Parker Keckeisen. And then we saw Carter beat Parker. And my point when Willie picked Parker earlier in the preseason, he kind of used the logic of Carter coming up, Parker defending his weight. I said, that's fine. Carter is a 4-time national champ. And I think I tweeted it maybe during the duel. To hear Shane Sparks say when somebody's actively wrestling, Carter, a 4-time national champ, is crazy because we've never heard that before. We've heard the closest we've gotten to it is here's a 3-time national champ going through his 4th. He's going to join 5 guys, 6 guys who have done it. We've never heard commentary, active commentary with the 4-time national champ, a 4-time national champ. And it's just like you hear that, and it's crazy that we get a year of watching a four-time national champ defend that 4-time title. And even though he can't lose those 4 titles, like I say, defend that title, like he's putting that on the line here to win a 5th one. And I think he's doing a damn good job of, I think he got healthy. He looks like he's, 100% bonus on the year. And even though he hasn't had the toughest schedule so far, I mean, he majored all red 11-2 this past weekend.
Impressive win.
He majored Colton Hawks 10-1, who's been doing pretty decent this year. So, it's Carter out in front, and then I think Parker. Look, could Parker shock the world? Absolutely. He's a very good wrestler. He's very tough. He's a returning national champ who was in contention for the Hodge last year. But I just think the pick is Carter. And, I don't know, too, if, I was never a good enough wrestler to understand fully the difference of being in somebody's head from a standpoint of, like, does Carter kind of have that big brother syndrome with everybody because he's so good? Or what's the underdog mentality of somebody like Parker who has the capability to win a national champion and did it, or a national championship and did it, to be like, I've got nothing to lose. I'm an underdog here. Go out and let it fly. So it's going to be great. Free. I mean, you're talking about, a preview. If I'm marketing NCAAs, I don't care what happens at any weight. If I'm sitting in a meeting marketing NCAAs right now, and I'm telling everybody first run of the topics, if it's Carter versus Parker, that's the main event.
Absolutely.
You have a returning national champ versus guy going for the 5th national championship ever. That's the main event. So regardless here, this should be the main event. This should be the biggest match of the year. There's a big difference between these guys wrestling an exhibition match in November and doing it on the biggest stage for the 5th national championship. So my pick is Carter. I think he does it, and I think it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, I think you market Carter for going for 5, regardless of, he could face anybody. He could face the 33rd seed in the finals if that were actually possible, of course. But you market him as the
if
the
he
main
had
event.
his way, he said last year, just let me wrestle every kid in the bracket. I don't really care.
He could do it too. I think he'd be the one guy to do it. 197 in heavyweight, just to wrap up here. And again, Justin, appreciate your time today coming on 3 Wrestling. So 197. It's weird because this one I struggled with in the preseason because I was like, well, Ferrari's back, but he's been out for 3 years. Buchanan has a new spot. He made a big run last year, and then seeing him up close at NCAA's last year where he had a match in the blood run with Poznanski, who we alluded to before. That was a tiebreaker match, and then of course the winner of that ended up being Buchanan. He went on a run for 3rd place. Cardenas, to me, going to Michigan, I said there's some kind of Michigan effect for some of these guys who go there for a grad year because of that room. That is an elite room up in Ann Arbor. So I picked Cardenas in the preseason. I'm going to stick with that. But Barr has me thinking in a different way. Buchanan's still unbeaten. And, of course, Ferrari, now that he's gotten to the double-digit matches, it seems like, okay, he's starting to turn it back up a little bit. Maybe he isn't the national championship form that he was at Oklahoma State a few years ago. Maybe he'll get there. But I think because all these guys are unbeaten, they're getting more matches underneath their belt. It's going to be a little bit tighter than I anticipated. I'm still going to stick with Cardenas, but this one I'm a little less confident in among those top 4 guys at this point.
Yeah, it's tough, man. This is a weight that for me, I'm going. There's so many different arguments where I think right now on January 21st, if you pick any of those top 4 guys, I think, let's say there's 4 people and each one picks somebody different. One person's going to be right by happen chance, and the other 3 I don't think are going to look stupid by picking the other 3.
Right.
Because AJ Ferrari, when was the last time he lost a wrestling match? It's been a long time. Forget the Soldier Salute DQ against Zach Glazier, whatever. On one hand, I'm like, he has not won since 4 years ago. It was 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if you look at his career since then, he has not lost a match. So it's like, on one hand, it's been 4 years. On another, it's literally been an entire presidency. Biden was just sworn in.
Yeah, you're right. He has not lost an entire presidential term, which is kind of insane.
So it's crazy. Literally, Joe Biden was sworn in. And it's like, so he's, let me see. Joe Biden was sworn in, and then Ferrari lost. He lost to Noah Adams February 14th, 2021. It's almost been 4 years since he's lost. So, the argument's there for him. Cardenas and Buchanan are a 1-2. Those guys are just one and the same to me. Yeah. I think they're wrestling very similarly. You've got Buchanan, who's 12-0. Cardenas is 11-0. Buchanan has 83% bonus. Cardenas has 90% bonus. Those 2 guys, the argument's there for them to win. Absolutely. Cardenas, like you said, some of the Michigan magic where, these guys go there and that room is so tough. You saw it with Soriano. He went there, won a national championship. I absolutely think it can happen. Buchanan looks like he's truly turned it up a notch. He looks great this year. It could absolutely happen. I'm going Barr. Call it, listen, I'm biased. I love Josh Barr. This is absolutely make no bones about it. I'm rooting for Josh Barr. And listen, he's undefeated. The Penn State magic in March, especially with freshmen, has been proven. So while it's absolutely a homer pick, you can't discredit that pick simply because of that, because he's proven that. Now, again, AJ Ferrari's not going to see anybody until the postseason.
Correct.
He'll see Stephen Little in the postseason, and that's it.
Yeah.
No, he'll see Trey Munoz and Stephen Little in February. Right. But that's it. So in the meantime, Cardenas, Buchanan, Barr are going to wrestle. And listen, just because one of those guys has to take a loss, just the nature of the schedule, you're going to have Barr and Buchanan wrestle. One of these guys is going to take a loss, and I don't really think it changes depending on how the match goes, I don't think it's really going to change the outcome. If Barr or Buchanan lose to each other, I don't think it discredits too much either one for NCAAs. So I'm going Barr, but any of those top 4 guys, I think there's a case absolutely they can win. And that next tier, it seems like there's a gap again. It's one of those weights where for me, it's like those 4 undefeated guys who are combined 40-0. And then you have Stephen Little, Michael Beard, Luke Serber, Andy Smith, kind of that next tier. So the case to be made for those top 4, I think the arguments are all there.
Yeah, you have an argument for Barr for sure. I could see it. I personally, I would want to wait to see if he wins Big Tens, then it's like, okay, I think he's my pick for NCAAs when we get to Philadelphia.
That's too easy, though, Nick.
I know it's too easy. It is too easy.
Listen, okay, I'll make a take. The Big Ten champ will win NCAAs at 97.
Now that's too easy. So, but I do like that. And again, the Ferrari factor to me is the biggest X factor in this weight. If he is peak, then I think he's the guy to beat, even though he had that 2 to 3 year gap before he officially came back to college. But as you said, whole presidency hasn't lost.
There will have to be a documentary on AJ that, I mean, and I think it should be all the good and all the bad. If AJ Ferrari wins a national championship, give me the documentary. I don't care if you love him or hate him. It's going to be worth watching.
Oh, I'm
here
watching.
You talk about
absolutely.
A one-loss freshman season where he won NCAAs, and then he had all these different legal issues and personal issues, and then he comes back, and if he can win now, give me that documentary. And honestly, I hope it's not just like, I don't even want just a flow doc. Give me like a Netflix doc of like overarching college athletic
3-part series.
Right. Of like a fall from grace and a rise back to the top. Like
at Cal State Bakersfield of all places too, which would be, putting that program on the map tenfold by comparison.
Yeah. And I don't think you can, all the legal stuff and issues and like, I think that you can't make that documentary without saying it, because there's absolutely a group of people that when you fall from grace, right or wrong, they're going to continue to hate you. There's just that group of people that, and I'm not saying they're right or wrong, I'm just saying that group of people exist. But so I think you have to make that part of the story of if he can do this and just, man, that's a wild story. Yeah,
it'll certainly be one of the storylines to watch as we progress through the rest of the season. So we'll wrap up here with heavyweight. And again, appreciate your time this morning. Again, I agree Kirk Fleet to start the season, but I got to change it. It's Gable Steveson. I don't want to say next topic because I do think Kirk Fleet has made strides in his wrestling. He obviously won the national title last year. I personally believe he's the one guy who's going to give Gable maybe some fits, and maybe the one guy he doesn't major or tech this season. But Gable, to me, I know he hasn't wrestled 10 matches yet. He hasn't gotten double digits, but he's pretty much picked up right where he left off. People want to say, well, he did WWE, did the NFL, tried to make a run in training camp this past summer with the Bills, but the guy was still wrestling. He was still training. He was still getting it in the event that he came back. He is back. And I think aside from Kirk Fleet and maybe Wyatt Hendrickson, he's going to absolutely dominate everybody else, be a buzzsaw. He'll await Kirk Fleet or Wyatt Hendrickson in the finals. Gable Steveson, maybe more than Messenbrink. I think I'm more confident picking Gable to win it all than I would be Messenbrink at this weight.
I'm still the most people might think I'm crazy here. My most confident pick is Messenbrink because he doesn't have a returning national champ in the field.
Fair.
Gable is without a doubt the favorite to win this. And if I'm making a pick, it's going to be Gable. But there's an argument to be made. If you're a Penn State fan, I would absolutely not throw the towel in on Kirk winning a national title. Couple reasons why. Number one, I think Kirk has continued to improve. Mm-hmm. Kirk has only gotten better. He has not gotten worse. He's the returning national champ at the weight, and he has not lost since. anytime you have a guy like that, same with Alirez. I think Mendez is a clear pick. And I'm not saying Mendez Alirez is Gable Kirk, but I'm saying when you have a returning national champ who hasn't lost, you got to be in the mix no matter who it is. Mm-hmm. And I always laugh because Shane Sparks always gives me flack for picks and predictions because he's the most – his Bible is anybody can win any given day. And to a degree, he's not wrong. You know,
right.
I sincerely think Shane Sparks, his oxygen is Matt Ramos beating Spencer Lee. Like when the biggest upset happens, he thrives because it is such a sport of anything can happen.
Right.
So I think regardless of who is in the field, I think one of the reasons Gable can come back and compete like he is because how good he is. It's like when Cal came out of retirement to make the world team in like 2011. These guys are in such a finite group of people that can compete at that level that's why Gable can come back and compete like he is. Now, can Gable beat Kirk? Absolutely. Do I think Kirk has a shot? Yes, absolutely. Regardless of who's in the field, I still think to win a national championship is not easy. I don't care who you are. Mm-hmm. So I think you have that. Now, the other argument for Penn State fans to make is Gable has only lost to one guy in college. That one guy, you're a Jersey guy, you know him well,
that's
Anthony
right.
Cassar. And it's like nobody thought Cassar was going to beat Gable. And then he beat him in Big Tens. Everybody thought that was a fluke. And then he beat him again in the NCAA Finals 4-3. And that same coaching staff that was in the corner then is in the corner now.
Right.
So is there an argument to be made for Kirk to win? Absolutely. And as many people, and I don't get it, because for as many people that want to just crown this week, Gable next topic, are you not at least interested in seeing how it plays out? Like, I
would love to see it now. Absolutely.
Gable's the pick. But, man, it's still going to be great to see this weight play out the rest of the year. Do I think Kirk has a shot? Absolutely. I was arguing with people earlier in the year. I think Nomad tweeted, like, would Gable be minus 800 to win a national championship? And that led into a whole weekend of debate and conversation. But look, I'm rooting for Kirk. He's one of my guys. I've worked with him. So there's obviously, and for people like listening who might not know, like, I'm a Penn State guy because Cal became a client of mine when I started my agency in 2008. Right. And then when he moved to Penn State, I never went to college. I became a Penn State fan for him because he was my guy. And I started working with these guys. So I'm a fan because at my agency, we work with a lot of these athletes. You know, so it's hard. It's not like I'm definitely one of the most luckiest fans where it's like I became a Penn State fan at the perfect time. Like, I was going to start rooting for Iowa State because when Cal became my client, and I'm like, so Cal and Varner became my first two clients in wrestling, and I'm like, I think I'm a Cyclones fan now. And then they both went to Penn State, and I'm like, all right. And it was only 3 hours for me. So I used to go down there all the time. Obviously less now with married, having kids and all that. But yeah, like, man, it's not just the Penn State bias. It's working with these guys that's creates a bias to some degree, but it's also just who you're rooting for. You got to root for people. If you're in Jersey and you want to root for Jersey people, go for it.
Yeah.
Don't let anybody tell you can't.
I try to stay, try to stay unbiased as much as possible. But of course, being a Rutgers alum and having broadcasted for the team for a decade at this point, it's hard not to be a little bit happier when I see those guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
And listen,
I don't mind the hate for being a Penn State guy when I get it, because I think for me, and I know you consume a lot of the same content I do, like, I like watching Part of My Take and having Big Cat have a complete Chicago bias and having PFT have a complete Washington bias and having Max root for the Eagles and Memes rooting for the Jets. Like, I like watching podcasts like that where you do have a rooting vested interest and you're going to get those high of highs and lows of lows. If you're a fan, like, it's great to to watch unbiased content at times. But I don't know about you. For me, like watching the traditional media is getting so boring because I like the banter in sports. I like the sports fandom. Like Big Cat always says it that like when the Bears lose, he's like, I can't wait for you sickos and perverts to tune in and watch me like cry.
Well, because it's real, and I agree with you. Having working in the industry and having to basically track along with the traditional media, especially for college football, the NFL, and what we do at On3. It's the same thing. We want more of the passion, the unique voice, which I think we try to do it On3 compared to the traditional medium. So I'm with you on that. I'm glad you root for Penn State because it's on foot. You're open about it, so I respect that a lot.
I also root for my guys. Like
and if Greg's your guy, I don't blame him for rooting for him at all. And I think he is the biggest challenger to Gable. So to circle back to the championship conversation, I think he's the biggest challenger. I still think Gable's going to win, but I'm eager, just like the Kassar matchups. Maybe we see a Big Ten final, and maybe obviously not like Gable and Kassar, where it was Big Ten finals and NCAA semis, but maybe this time we see a Big Ten final, and then we see it again in the NCAA final, and who knows what kind of results we get. That's why they have to wrestle the match. So we'll end it on that note. Yeah, we'll end it on that note. Bash, I appreciate you, man. It was good to talk to you. Love watching you and Willie and whoever else you have on the podcast, BASCHAMANIA. Obviously, everyone can give you a follow on Twitter at Justin J. Bash, and obviously wherever you find. I'm assuming the podcast, YouTube, Spotify, all the usual places.
Everywhere. Yeah. Are you going to? I know you cover a lot of the Rutgers. Are you going to the Penn State-Iowa duel?
Yep, we'll be there on Friday night. It's on Big Ten Network, so I won't be on the mic. I believe that's I believe Shane and Jim will be there in person. They've kind of gone back and forth with being there in person and calling remote from Chicago, but I believe they're going to be there on Friday. Then obviously on Big Ten Plus, we'll have the duel on Sunday against Illinois, which should be a good one. Probably maybe a more competitive duel on Sunday.
I don't know how it's going to go, but I'm taking my son, who turns 3 next month, to Penn State, Iowa. It's going to be his first wrestling duel ever. So,
and you just happen to have it at Penn State, Iowa. 1 versus 2.
Not by design at all.
A new duel of the decade, duel of the century. We'll end on that. Justin Bash with me on On3 Wrestling. Justin, thanks a lot, man. We'll talk soon, and then hopefully I'm catching you at NCAA's in Philly this year.
Awesome, man. Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on today.